Hello, magical people of the internet. I am Jen, and welcome to I Never Thought I Would, where we talk about doing things we never thought we would do and the fascinating places that they can lead us. I have such an exciting guest today. He's an author and he's a musician, Shane Wilson. Hi, Shane.
Hi, Jen. I love it when you introduce me as an exciting guest. I feel like people are expecting me to do like cartwheels or something.
Well, we are.
Oh, well, I am not dressed for that. I'm still rocking quarantine chic. So, I'm a chest up sort of situation here.
Put your pants on.
Right. Man, if I had $1 for every time.
Every time you should have been wearing your pants in the past
Yeah,
year, but
absolutely.
weren't.
Yeah. But thank you for having me on this lovely program.
Yeah, this is exciting. So you've got two incredible books out, kind of part of a series, more accurately set in the same universe. And we will get into those shortly. But as always, we are going to talk about you doing something you never thought you would. And your genre is pretty imaginative. So
Mm-hmm.
I have high expectations for your imagination leading you somewhere off the beaten trail.
Well, I don't know that it's necessarily off the beaten trail. I feel like plenty of people have worn the trail down before me and probably did a better job at it than I have. But the thing that I thought I would never do is make music. And I I did the thing that so many kids do, where they experiment with a instrument, in their childhood. And I took piano lessons when I was a kid, and I hated it. Like I hated practice, and it was so frustrating. I couldn't make my fingers do different things at the same time. And
How
so
old were you?
I oh I think I was in second, third. It was at elementary school,
Yeah, that's
and
young.
I guess I guess my hands were also like frustratingly small because of me being a child. And so but it was incredibly frustrating, and so I did walk away from it after like 6 months, and I never thought I'd go back. And I always regretted it, obviously, and regretted always wanted to play music because I love music. I think most of us do, right? That's a really dumb and trite thing to say, but I always wanted to understand music in the same way that I understand writing,
Mhm.
because I have a master's in English literature. I have a master's in creative writing, and so I've spent a lot of my adult life studying how to make stories work. And I wanted that same relationship with music, because when I heard a song that moved me emotionally, I wanted to understand how it did that, right?
Mhm.
Because I think music has such intrinsic power to move and motivate, and I just needed to know more about it. And as I was working on my second novel, which is about a musician, because again, fascinated with that whole thing, right? I thought, well, let's get a guitar, and let's because I wanted to know what it felt like, what my character would feel like when he was playing. Even
Mhm.
if all I do is like feel the strings on my fingertips and learn how to tune it and make a couple of chords. Like I wanted that experiential aspect to come into the writing.
Yeah, the sensorial experience of
Yeah.
guitar, so you could
I
describe
didn't want to Yeah, I wanted musicians reading the book to feel like I had actually held an instrument before. And I didn't want it to come across as very surface level sort of understanding. I wanted to understand the instrument on some level. And so then I got the guitar and just kind of picked out some chords and things like that. And I wasn't very good. And then this is the literature person in me, right? I read an essay about how to play the guitar, like just like how to strum it and things like that. And it made sense in a way that YouTube videos never did, or like talking to people ever did. It just something clicked. So then I found a song that I knew that I had heard a million times, that had the chords in it that I had learned, that I'd taught myself. And I used that to figure out the strumming patterns and everything. And from there, it was just like we were just off to the races, right? Because I think that the first time you play a song for yourself, it's like unlocking a magic trick,
it.
uh, where this thing has been so mystical to you for so many years, right? It's something that you've loved, but you've never understood. And now all of a sudden you've gotten a peek behind the curtain. And there's just something really contagious and infectious about that. And you never lose that sense of wonder, right? And now I just want to understand every song in that same way, and I want to write my own songs, right? So uh, I never thought I would play guitar, and now I do.
That's incredible. I can completely relate to you about the piano thing because I took piano lessons when I was quite young. I was a little younger than you, actually. I think I was about 4 or 5 when my
Wow.
mother started me. And I know there are little virtuoso children that
Yeah.
age that can totally play, but exactly like a piano is a full-size instrument, regardless
Yeah.
of what size the human is.
Yeah.
Like guitars come in different sizes, violins come in different sizes. Um, so the piano, I didn't want to, I think I was too young, first of all. I couldn't sit still. I didn't want to rehearse. And then I regretted it as I got older. And when I was in about junior high, we still had the piano and the piano books hidden in the bench and
Right.
stuff. So I would open them up and I would kind of teach myself because I remembered some of the basics. Like I remembered where middle C was, and
Yeah.
I could,
Yeah. Right.
and I could kind of suss out some stuff. So I retaught myself how to like read music, and I can very amateurly, play a couple of songs, but
Yeah.
I actually like, I'm inspired by you because I've always wanted to like actually make the time to learn and actually play.
Yeah. And it is such a journey, right? Because I'm nowhere near like good. I call myself a like a glorified campfire guitarist. I play rhythm pretty well. I'm very limited in my like lead guitar skill. I can't shred or anything like that. But also, the music that I like to play isn't necessarily like that. I like storytellers. I like Bruce Springsteen and Jason Isbell and
Mm,
those types. And so I'm much more interested in a man alone on a stage with his instrument telling
mhm,
stories. And so I don't really have these grand aspirations of being the next, I don't know, Slash or whatever. Um, I'm more realistic than that, but yeah, I like where I am. Obviously, I want to get better. We always do, and I do think that the piano is a whole different beast. Like I've got a keyboard here that I've messed around with some, and I know enough to get myself in trouble, right? That's kind of the thing. I can play chords, I can pick out songs, I can translate the songs that I write for guitar to the piano in some way. It's not anything special. It's just kind of like banging out chords, very Coldplay.
mhm. Well, first of all, I'm sure you're much better than you claim to be. I'm sure you're very modest. And you also have a two-man band called Sequoia Rising. How did that come about? You have to have more confidence than you're letting on. Otherwise, you wouldn't, be playing in front of people.
It is This is a really interesting question, and it's very acoustic driven. It's we plug in, but we don't have electric instruments necessarily, um, in the way that you would normally think of electric, right? Um, the my the guy who plays with me, Jerry, is my percussionist, but it's still just hand drums, and the cajon mostly, right? That big wooden box that they sit on and bang on. But the music is very story driven. If I get to play what I want to play, and herein lies one of my great strifes with the whole business of being a working musician, is if I get to play what I want to play, then I play very story driven songs. Um, the first part of the pandemic, when everything was on lockdown, you were telling me off air about how you started this. This was the thing that you poured yourself into. I
Mhm,
poured myself into our debut album, and we had these songs written and had done some recording, some demo stuff. But while I was alone for those, 3 months or whatever, I was spending just every day just pouring over these tracks and recording. So on the album, I play everything, I play the guitar and I play the cajon and I play the piano and I play all of this stuff, right? Uh, because I was just by myself, kind of like losing my mind a little bit and having one of those like mad scientist artist moments, you know, where I'm in here not knowing really anything that I how to record an album or anything and kind of figuring it all out as I go, which is I think the fun of try that's the fun part of trying anything new, you know, and also the scary part because you're constantly taking a leap of faith every day, and you will never know if it actually lands, right? Unless you've defined what that means for yourself in some very tangible way, and I don't really define success in those sorts of ways. So um, for me, success looks like something that I've written or something that I've sang or something that I do has moved someone, right?
Mhm.
That is success. Have you found something in this art that is valuable to you in some way? Then, you know, that's something that I'll never know, right? For the people that find it. But it's exciting to know that they might. So the songs are all stories, and the album, if you're interested in me talking about that some more,
Yes, please.
because I think a lot of what the songs are like is kind of wrapped up in the title of the album, which is something again that I slaved over forever. What do I want to call this thing? But the album is called "Of All the Things I've Ever Said, I Mean This the Most," um, and it's sort of a play on that whole idea that, you know, I'm a writer. I've written a lot of stuff. I'm a teacher. I talk for a living. I've put a lot of words out into the universe, you know, and at the same time, all of the things that I've ever said, the fiction that I've written and all of that, the album, those songs are the most sort of like honest reflection of what's going on up here, right?
Yeah.
Or here, as it were.
Mhm.
And uh and when the song I love really wordy titles, you know, like some of my favorite albums have really wordy titles. There's this guy David Ford out of the UK who has an album called I Sincerely Apologize for All the Trouble I've Caused. It's one of my favorite album titles. It's a great album, and and he also writes very acoustic, very story driven music. And I thought in that same vein, you know, like I'll follow in
Mhm.
those footsteps. Um, and so yeah, those that's I want the words to be more powerful than the instrumentation, right? It's the guitar is just a vehicle for the story,
Mhm.
which is why I'm not super concerned with getting wildly good at it. You know, like I want to be proficient. I don't want to be bad, but I'm not worried about the guitar taking the spotlight from the stories, you know?
Mhm. Very
Uh,
cool.
yeah. And you asked about how the band got together. Um, I don't know if that story is interesting or not, but I can tell it. I'll tell it short in a short way. Um, so I was playing the guitar a little bit and I had not really ever considered taking it out of the apartment, but you know, we had people that would come over to the apartment and we would all hang out and, you know, whatever vibe, I guess, have some whiskey, and vibe. And so it got to the point where people were interested in participating in like music stuff, right? The guitar was there. There were a couple of guitars around. And so I just bought this cajon just to sit around so that if somebody that maybe couldn't play the guitar, anybody can bang on a box, right? So um, and so it almost became like unofficial auditions, right? Because I didn't realize I was looking for a bandmate until this guy Jerry sat on it one night, and I didn't know. I've been hanging out with Jerry for years, right?
Mhm.
And you know, we met at karaoke singing old 80s songs, you know, and we hit it off, and so we were hanging out, and never thought Jerry would be the guy that would like carry rhythm for the band, right? And he just sat down on this thing, and what we would do is we would just play the like Alexa, play Spotify, and um, just kind of jammed to that. And he just sat on it. I think it was "Sympathy for the Devil" or one of those old
Mhm.
Rolling Stones songs was on, and just like hit the rhythm perfect. And I was like, "What is happening right now?" And so we started playing some together, and then one night I was too drunk, probably, and was talking to a guy that owns a bar in town. And I was like, "You should let me and Jerry play for your bar sometime." And he was like, "Yeah, sure. Come on out Sunday. What are you guys doing Sunday?" And I was like, "We'll be there, man." And so then we had to come up with a band. I was like, "Oh, we're a band now." I was like, now we've got to have now we need a name, right? Because we're going to be playing somewhere. And so I lived on Castle Rising Road and he lived on Sequoia Avenue. and we just shoved them together and made Sequoia Rising out of it.
That's so cool, but it's actually such a cool title. Like it's
It
such
is
a
it's
cool
a
band
great
name.
name, and
Yeah.
it does get at the heart of what we do, right? Because if we're storytellers, then we are much more along the lines of Americana or roots music, folk music,
Mhm.
and those roots, like the Sequoia roots, right? Like of that old
Yeah,
tree, like they run deep too. So like it's a totally appropriate name for sure.
I love it. That's so cool. And now I want to talk about your books.
Awesome.
So, okay, do you want to get into the world of the books first, or should we talk about the first book and then segue? What's the best? Because I know, because like I said in the intro, the books take place in the same universe, but they're not necessarily a continuation.
Right. So it's I think probably the world is the better way in,
Yeah, that's what I thought.
even though the world definitely came second.
Yeah.
I didn't write the first novel with the intention of writing this like epic story that spanned across different and told different stories set in the same universe. But I think it probably makes sense to start with the universe. So I write in a genre that is like magical realism or contemporary fantasy. So it's fantasy stories set in our world, right? Um, the people are mostly just normal people. Like there's not a lot of there are not different species of people. Like I'm not writing about elves and things like that. There are no dragons. I know I lost a lot of people already, but uh, you can
I
just
don't
always
think
imagine that there's a
so.
dragon out there. You know what I mean? But
Exactly.
I
Imagine
like
dragon. Imagine your dragon.
imagine your dragon. Yeah, man, imagine that's how they came up with that. Um,
Right? Yeah,
but
that's
yeah,
they're a cool band. I'm a fan of theirs, but
yeah.
right, I digress.
The but the so I think the unifying aspect of all of the stories is this school that is home to the muses. It's a school where muses are trained. And so the universe as a whole is sort of a take on that old idea of the Greek muses, right?
Mhm.
The inspiration of all art. And but in this iteration, the muses are trained in the art of inspiration, and inspiration is a word that is defined very liberally, right? Like it's not inspiration of art always. It can be like this curriculum at the school teaches the muses to inspire um, how to inspire people to move beyond grief or trauma, to walk them through the grieving process, or to move them beyond their personal traumas. Then there are still muses that inspire art and creativity and things like that. Um, and that's so they are kind of like this like mystical group of people, you know, that are trained in this place that exists kind of outside of our time, and then they cross over into our world where they meet regular people and use their magic to inspire them in whatever way they need that inspiration. So that's all of that was an accident. The Because it all started with that initial novel, which is called A Year Since the Rain, and it's about this sad sack guy who um, like meets this woman at a bar, and they really hit it off, and he kind of falls in love with her, but it's still a very young relationship. And early on in that relationship, one of the first nights she sleeps over, he gets a phone call that his father has died unexpectedly, and she is there to comfort him, right? But it also elevates their relationship to a status that she wasn't necessarily ready for, right? Because when you hold someone who's weeping over the death of a parent, like that brings a new gravity and a new momentum to any relationship that's new, you know?
Yes.
And so she ghosts him, for lack of a better word. She just leaves.
Mhm.
She has this new job coming up, and she's told him about it, and but eventually, like she's just gone. And so the novel is written as a letter to her.
Mhm.
Um, and he tells her all these stories and everything. And at first he's very bitter and everything. And it feels at first like he's bitter at her for leaving, but through the journey and through his interactions with the Muse character who he meets, the Muse in this book is named Nona, he learns to process his grief, and he realizes that he's actually angry at himself for not being closer to his dad, right? And that he was projecting all of that anger onto this unnamed woman who left him at the beginning of the story. And so there's an example of one of the muses that sort of helps someone through grief. The second novel, by the time I got to the second novel, I knew more about it, right? I was like, oh, okay, so these stories are connected, even though they weren't when I first started writing it.
Yeah.
But like I said, the second novel, The Smoke in His Eyes, is about a musician. And so the muse in this story is obviously like more traditional type of, she inspires art in him. Um, and uh, in this story, like I was really fascinated with what inspiration looks like and where it comes from, and the reasons why we make art anyway. Like I had just published this other book, and I was dealing with all of this imposter syndrome and everything that we all go through, and I was like, who am I? I'm just some guy, like, who wants to read my book, And so I became really fascinated with two ideas, those two ideas being, what is it that makes us, what is it that makes some people create, and what is it that makes a smaller portion of that group share? Like, what is the desire in us that prompts us to share the things that we create, and
Mhm.
not just like the catharsis of doing it for ourselves, because I think there is a distinction. And I don't know that I've gotten to any answers really, but that novel explores those ideas through three characters. The Muse character, who's a visual artist as well in the novel, and then the musician protagonist, TJ, and his musician partner who plays in a band with him, and her name is Leela. And they all have different aspirations. They all have different reasons for getting into art in the first place.
Mhm.
Um, but I thought it as a cool thought experiment to take artists in a different medium than myself and explore the reasons why they might want to do it, right? One of them wants financial gain. One of them wants to write the perfect song. One of them wants nothing more than to like make her stuff and just hide it, from the world. And it was really cool to explore that. But the thing about that second novel that sort of ties into the first is the second novel is where we really get into some more of the mythology about the school, right?
Mhm.
And when and me wanting to explore these ideas about inspiration, I was also really interested in where it goes when it's gone. And so Muna, the muse in that story, really comes to represent the the literal physical embodiment of inspiration. And when she's served her purpose and taught TJ everything he needs to know about himself and the world in order to orchestrate this one beautiful song, she disappears. And
Mhm.
he's left only with like the smoke, like that remains after she's gone, Um, and so he goes on this journey to find everything that he can about her, and it leads him to this school. But again, because this school exists outside of this time and place, he only finds like a shell of it, right? It's just sort of a shell of the school. But in the school, he finds artifacts from when it was running. And one of those artifacts is like a roll book. And you see the names of the different muses that appear in the different stories, right? As like an Easter egg that unifies all of these
Mhm.
experiences. But I know I just rambled for a really long time, but um,
No, it's fascinating. I'm so fascinated by this. First of all, I love mythology, and I actually last summer went back and read like all the Greek plays. And I read the
nice.
Epic of Gilgamesh and Ovid's Metamorphoses.
Yeah, hey, that's a good way to do it.
So number one, I'm fascinated. Like this is so up my alley. Would it be like terrible if I say it's like a Hogwarts for muses?
Yeah, it is not, that's not terrible. Like the house itself is definitely not a castle. It's envisioned as this like labyrinth of a cabin tucked away in the woods.
Mhm.
Um like
I
in the
don't mean
Appalachian
like
Mountains.
structurally. I
Yeah,
just meant
for
like,
sure. But yeah, but
um,
that's sort of where my brain has always gone, is it is a little bit like that. And there's one teacher and she like runs the whole thing, you know. And then on their 18th birthday, they are escorted to the edge of the property line, and then they go out into the world one at a time, right? They're not allowed to leave together. They have to go individually and find their own way. They're not allowed to have contact with each other. And I'm moving now toward a story that is going to have two of the muses look for each other in the real world, like after they've left
Yeah.
the school. And
That,
so I'm going to explore that a little bit. So yeah, I mean, I think it's a really cool world. It's been a fun sandbox to play in.
yeah, and it's so original and unique. I've never heard of this subject matter being incorporated into like a fantasy novel before. So this is really cool. The other thing I wanted to like touch on is the idea of why do we create? You were
Yeah,
talking about that a few minutes ago, and like what we create to share and what we create for ourselves, because I'm sure you have private writing. I have private writing that
yeah,
nobody will ever see
right.
ever. You know, and it's true. It's like, how do we know what, because when we're writing it, we're just writing it because we need to for our
Yeah. Well, yeah, earlier I mentioned like how the band was mostly an accident,
Mhm.
and I think that most first forays are accidental. I didn't mean to write a novel. I didn't want to. Yeah, like at first, when I started writing A Year Since the Rain, I thought I was writing I thought I was writing a poem.
Mhm.
I had published in poetry before and creative nonfiction before I got into fiction publications,
Mhm.
and I in my brain I was writing this like beautiful epic love poem about this girl that that had left me the year before, right? That we had broken up the year before, and on the day that she left, when I said goodbye to her, it was raining, and I remember like the pollen of like the South Georgia pollen was swirling in the like the sewer drains and everything. Like I had all these great visuals, and I wrote this thing, and I wrote it 4 or 5 pages. It was all garbage. When I went back and read this poem, I couldn't make the poem work
Mhm.
for whatever reason, and so I like shelved it again and went back another like 6 months or so, and started writing a short story about a town that was going through a drought.
Mhm.
And eventually, it clicked with me that that was A Year Since the Rain, right? Not the poem,
Ah.
and that the drought, because I had this idea. The original idea for the poem was that that last day that it rained, right, was the last day that I saw her, because rain is life and all of this stuff, right? Super melodramatic and emo. But in the novel, it becomes this like allegory for grief, right? Because the drought begins on the day that the girl leaves him at the beginning of the book,
Mm.
which is shortly after his father dies, right? And so, and the entire novel, like the drought continues to like claim this town until it's like crumbling in on itself. You know, it becomes like overwhelming,
Yeah.
and he has to leave. You know, and it forces movement and growth out of him
Mhm.
when he was refusing to do so. He was content to stay there and like decay with the town, you know. But Nona, the muse, teaches him that like there is more, right? Like like it doesn't have to end here.
Mhm.
And so he strikes out on his own, and just as the town is like crumbling inward, you know. Um, and yeah, I don't know where that rant all started, but yeah, the novel thing. Yeah, I never meant to do that. Like I at some point I was like, I'm writing a short story, and then you know, 15,000 words. I was like, I'm writing a novella, and then at some point I'm like, well, okay, so this is a novel, and I think with that kind of writing, especially when you're done with it, you're like, I've got to do something with this, right? Like I put so much effort and like
Exactly.
psychological torture into making this thing. I
Wait,
need
how can you be an artist if you don't have psychological torture? Like that's the most important ingredient.
absolutely, absolutely. And so yeah, so I think a lot of it is accidental. And even after the first one, even though I decided to write a second novel, the way that all comes together is never really by design, no matter how much time you spend trying to design it. You know, it's going to take over on its own at some point. It just, we are the vehicle for the story, right? It needs us to get out.
And they take on a life of their own.
For
And like
sure.
you said, and sometimes they take on a few different incarnations, like, oh, it didn't work as a poem. Okay, maybe it's going to be a short story. Oh, okay. And that's the other thing too, is a lot of times the piece is going to tell us what it needs and what it wants
Yeah.
to be, you know?
Yeah. And I think that this is the value of working in multiple modes, right? Is
Mhm.
that now I have more tools at my disposal for those stories to find their home, because some stories are songs and some are novels. And, I even wrote a play a couple of years ago, like some are meant for the
Wow.
stage and some are meant for these, so it's
Yes.
just, uh, I think that, like music opened up a different part of my brain and
Mhm.
allowed different stories to come out. It's like a Pandora's box thing, right? Except not terrible.
Yeah. Incredible. Well, I am so fascinated by you and your journey. And I would love to see Sequoia Rising one day if I ever make it out
Oh
to where
man.
you are.
Well,
That would
I'll
be
send you the
so
link to the
fun.
to the album. You can just listen to our super emotional weepy boy acoustic
I
songs.
definitely will, and I'll share the link below. So that leads me to, why don't you please tell us where we can find you, where we can find your books, your music, and of course, we'll have all the links
Yeah.
below to help to, I'm going to do that again. And of course, we'll have all the links below to make it easy for everybody out there to find you.
You nailed it. Uh, I'm easy to find. You can find everything at shanewilsonauthor.com. It is going to be home for all the music and everything too. And then I'm on all the socials at that Shane Wilson, all one word.
Great. And the book's on Amazon and
It's all
everywhere
over.
books
Yeah,
are
for sure.
sold. Excellent. Shane, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today. This was awesome.
Jen, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me today. This was awesome.
Yes, and I really can't wait to get my hands on your books, and I look forward to listening to your album this evening. And
Awesome.
thank you all out there in the interweb for tuning in. I'd like to challenge you to do something you never thought you would do. Let us know what it is and where it leads you in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe. Have a beautiful day.